Hello, Star Bros family, and welcome to another episode of the Star Bros podcast. We are excited that you are joining us this morning, evening, whenever you're deciding to listen. Don't know. That's up to you and your call. But we're glad that you're here. On this St. Patrick's Day for us is when we're recording.
Yes.
So, hope you're being safe, wearing something green. I'm not, so I'll pinch myself right now.
Is that the rule?
Yeah, I guess. Someone once upon a time made up that if you're not wearing green on St. Patrick's Day, you pinch them.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I have rarely worn green. I don't have much green in my closet.
This is your reminder to social distance and avoid the pinching.
Yeah, this is the perfect time to not wear green, by the way, because then you won't get pinched. Anyway, I am joined, as always, by my bro host, Jan Solo.
And I'm joined by my bro host, Ben Skywalker.
And we are excited to talk to you today about Women's History Month. Not very specifically Women's History Month, but it is Women's History Month. And so we thought we would cover Rey as part of this special episode.
Yeah, we wanted to find a way to recognize and acknowledge Women's History Month. And what better way than starting with one of the main Star Wars heroines or female heroes of the sequel trilogy, of the whole saga.
I would agree with that. And look, you can go with so many. There's so many great women in Star Wars. There's Leia. Let's just start with the best. No
My
offense to anyone else, but it's Leia just steals the show. But you've got Hera Syndulla from Rebels. You have Padme. You can go on with we're watching Last Jedi right now, and there's Admiral Holdo, who's great, right? So many women to choose from. But we thought we would pick one that, I don't know, was really interesting to me. I think is one of the more dynamic characters within Star Wars. So we will be talking about Rey as a character in this episode. Before we get into all that, we will talk about news. And before we get into all that, I want to ask a question. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. This is one of my favorite times of year. I feel like I've said that before. Maybe I'm just really excited about the seasonal changes and all the holidays, but
I feel like you say that every episode.
We're recording and it's light out.
Yes.
And we haven't recorded before sundown in months. And so it feels like there's a little bit of hope on the horizon. A lot of people are getting their vaccine. It's going to get a little bit warmer. It's looking like it's going to be nice and warm in the forecast here next week, which makes me think about summer cookouts and going to the pool and things like that. So I'm feeling pretty good. I'm excited for all that. But how are you, dude?
Well, before I get into that, I will say one thing I like about daylight savings, at least in this time, is the extra sunlight at the end of the day, sure. But I hate losing the hours of sleep.
It's terrible.
And I feel like I have a whole week to recover from that. It's tough.
I saw a cartoon, I think it was from the New Yorker, where there's a woman laying in bed and she's saying something to the effect of, how is losing an hour of sleep affecting me so much when we just lost a whole year?
Not wrong.
But yeah, the hour really threw me too, especially like the Monday morning when you have to go to work where you haven't had a real amount of time to get used to it yet.
Yeah.
And you're waking up an hour earlier, which who wants to do that anyway, anytime?
Nobody.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
Which is why somewhere on Capitol Hill is actually a bipartisan bill right now to make daylight savings permanent, which means, in general terms, we won't be doing this anymore. We won't fall back.
Yeah.
Come November or whenever that is.
And isn't it that so different parts of the world have different takes on this? Isn't it that some states in the US,
different states in the US, yeah,
like Arizona, I think does it,
yes,
or doesn't do it at the same time or something?
No, doesn't
like that.
do it at all.
They don't do it at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now we're at a 3-hour gap with them, and then apparently some random spot within Indiana, not the whole state of Indiana, just
Pawnee?
this one area of Indiana.
Is it Pawnee?
It has to be. That's really funny.
So in one spot in Indiana, they don't mess with the clocks. It's just the same time all year round.
Something like that. I don't know.
But if you maybe live in that spot but work outside of it, you have to be mindful of what time it is.
Yeah, there's probably someone that, if you are the person that lives outside of the area that observes daylight savings time, and you have to travel to a place that observes it, please let us know, because I want to know how your life is.
If you're one of these brave daily time travelers, fill us in on what magic happens in your life.
It's probably a very simple answer. They individually have to observe it when the rest of the town doesn't. I don't know.
I'm picturing they drive a DeLorean, they wear multiple watches, and really cool futuristic sunglasses.
You just exposed the extent of your nerdom right there. with that one comment. It's great. Anyway,
Guilty. But
I'm doing great, man.
Good.
I'll answer that question. Appreciate you asking.
Yeah.
How about we get into our first segment, though? The news from across the galaxy.
pew, pew. Let's do that.
Let's do it.
So we've got a couple of things. I think maybe there's a little bit more this week than our last couple of episodes. It's been pretty quiet.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a ton, but a little bit of news broke, I think just yesterday, about a couple of things that are coming to Disney Plus finally.
Bum-ba-ba-dum.
Yeah, and these are things that for a while people were saying will never, ever, ever be on Disney Plus. And Disney Plus is, for anybody who doesn't have it, pretty much has amassed all of the content under different categories that you could imagine. It's like Marvel Universe stuff. We've got all the Marvel movies, Marvel shows now, and so on. And there are some notable absences from the lineup of Star Wars things. Specifically, a couple of Ewok things from the 80s, the holiday special. And essentially the news that came out was that on April 2nd, and this is just the US, so I'm not sure what the releases will look like around the world, but April 2nd, a few things are going to hit Disney Plus at your home for the first time. And I'll run down the list real quickly because if you're like me, you're super excited about Ewoks and you want to know a lot more.
You might be alone in that camp, though.
I might be alone. I think there's a couple
No, you're
other people.
not. Ewoks are the best.
I think they're the best, the little murder bears. But we'll start with 1984's Caravan of Courage, an Ewok Adventure. That's the original spin-off Ewok movie, which is, I think, pretty much forgettable. I don't think it ever made it to DVD. I think it was on VHS, but I don't think it ever got like rerun again after that. I could be incorrect. But I guess it did well enough that they made a sequel. I don't know what year this came out, but it was called Ewoks: The Battle of Endor. And I'm pretty sure...
Didn't we see that already?
Did we?
The Battle of Endor?
We saw the Battle of Endor. Yeah. So I don't think I've seen that one. I think I've seen the first one. Maybe the second one. Is that like the battle told from the perspective of the Ewoks?
Maybe. We will find out.
We're going to find out. But Wilford Brimley is one of the more recognizable folks. I think there's a couple of recognizable folks in those movies. Do you know who Wilford Brimley is?
I don't.
He's in the diabetes commercials.
Still doesn't ring a bell.
No. I'll show you a picture at some point. He's like a mustachioed older gentleman. I don't know if he's with us anymore.
Is that what you call him? Mustachioed?
Mustachioed.
I have never heard that word.
You've never heard that?
No.
It's somebody with a mustache.
I got that.
Which I could just say.
But calling him mustachioed?
Mustachioed Wilford Brimley diabetes.
That mustachioed guy over there has some pistachio in his... All right, I had to go there.
Can you imagine if like there was some type of crime and the police came by and asked you to describe the perpetrator and you would describe them as mustachioed?
Yeah.
You think the cops would write that down verbatim?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either.
That's great.
But and there's also an animated series, Star Wars: Ewoks from 1985. I don't remember that either.
Don't remember it either.
So a lot of this stuff is going to be new to me. And I'm excited to see it, but I did see Caravan of Courage, which is a clunky kind of name, if you ask me. But I do remember seeing that at some point when I was really, really young. Maybe it was being replayed on TV or something. And I liked it, but I was probably 5 or something when I watched it. So be curious to see what I think now. But in addition to that, there's another one that's coming out that I don't think is as polarizing. I think a lot of people who grew up with the Ewoks love the Ewoks. A lot of people who didn't grow up with the Ewoks are sort of on the fence about them. But so I think that'll be sort of split. But people love Gennady Tartakovsky's Clone Wars.
Oh yes.
So that's going to be on. That's going to be on Disney Plus. So people are really excited about that.
Yep.
And then just a piece.
I know what you're about to say.
You know what I'm going to say?
Yep.
The Star Wars Holiday Special.
Uh-huh.
Which
I laugh at because they didn't even want to put the full thing on there.
They didn't want to put the full thing.
They just wanted to put this piece.
If you haven't heard it, we have an episode just about the Star Wars Holiday Special where we both made ourselves watch it and immediately regretted it. But I think if you haven't seen it, to sum it up, George Lucas famously said that if he had the time and was willing to do it, he would take a sledgehammer and find every single copy of this Star Wars Holiday Special in the world and smash it.
Well, you know what they say. If you don't have the time, the other option is money. You can just pay a bunch of people to smash him, I'm sure. And he's got the resources to do it. So,
and he's been pretty successful. I mean, it's not been officially re-released anywhere, but it's out on YouTube.
oh yeah,
if you
which
want to
is
ruin
as
your night.
official as you can get. If the whole world can see it on YouTube, then it's official.
That's a fair point. But so keep an eye out for all of those treats. Oh, I'm sorry. The snippet from the holiday special is the story of the faithful Wookiee. And that's an animated bit that is like embedded in the holiday special. If you guys haven't seen the whole thing, that's fine. But, check this part out if you can find it. They might just have a snippet on YouTube. The Boba Fett is in it.
It's the introduction of Boba Fett.
The introduction of Boba Fett and Din Djarin's, I forget what that rifle is called, like the pitchfork-looking rifle.
Oh, yeah.
But Boba Fett has that in this cartoon, which I guess is the origin of that weapon. So there's a lot of cool moments in it. There's some goofy moments, like we talked about how the planet it's supposedly the ocean that they land in, but it's like pasta sauce. It's like really thick
red
tomato sauce.
Yeah. Tasty.
Yeah. So there's some odd moments, but definitely worth checking out. So that stuff will hit Disney Plus in just a few weeks on April 2nd. So keep an eye out. And again, that's April 2nd in the US. I'm not sure where you guys are, if that's the same date.
Yeah. All of our international friends, let us know when you get it.
Yeah.
I didn't see any articles for that specifically, but yeah, that'll be exciting. I mean, I'll definitely watch the Ewok stuff just to be like, all right, I did that. Interesting. I did the same thing we'll have to have a whole episode when that stuff drops and just be like, we watched it.
Yeah.
And here's what we think. So look for that to come in the future.
I like that idea.
What else happened this week or the last 2 weeks, I should say, in Star Wars? So the one other thing that I had pulled was the Disney shareholder meeting happened.
Mm-hmm.
And in that shareholder meeting, Bob Chapek, the CEO of Disney, received a lot of questions. And one in particular was to talk about the future of Kathleen Kennedy since her contract is coming up. Which, when I read it, I was like, that's such a poorly worded question. It sounds like someone who obviously does not like Kathleen Kennedy. And it was apparently some shareholder from Texas, San Antonio, Texas, that just ask hey, can you comment on, are you firing her? Are you letting her go? Are you not going to renew her contract or something? It's you can ask that better.
The tone of it to me was something like, so are you going to fire her and replace her with somebody better, or are you dumb?
Jon Favreau or Dave Filoni. Yeah. It was like they weaved in John and Dave somehow.
I can't believe that guy
Favreau.
got on the air and was able to ask that question.
I know. That's what I thought. That's not the way to ask it. Maybe you say, with Kathleen Kennedy's contract coming up, how are you thinking about the future of Lucasfilm and its
succession
leadership?
Planning, all that stuff.
It's called succession planning in the world of business.
Yep.
And on a business-related call, that is an appropriate question.
Yeah.
So I thought you could have asked that so much better.
Yeah.
All right, move that to the side. Bob took a great approach to it and said, you know what? We have all the faith in Kathleen. We see her at the helm for the long term, and just doubled down on their support for Kathleen, which I think is great, personally. I mean, look, I don't think Kathleen has been perfect in her tenure, but we've gotten some great content regardless. We've gotten the Mandalorian, which people may not want to give her credit for, but you have to. She's the leader there. She's the one who went and got Jon Favreau. You got to give him that credit. There's some hiccups behind the scenes. All the stuff that happened on Solo, all the stuff that happened with Rise of Skywalker and Trevorrow. Sure, that was the only knock I had was, all right, you could have managed some of that better, but I mean, it was still a difficult job. I can't do that job.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that she deserves to keep that seat as long as she wants to keep it.
Almost nobody can do that job.
No.
And if you zoom out,
the criticism.
Yeah, if you zoom out and look at her portfolio of work, the stuff that she's produced for Star Wars fans, it's amazing.
Yeah. I think so.
And I think they're being genuine and authentic when they say that they're fans of hers and they support her and her leadership. I don't think that's people think there's a conspiracy theory of they don't want to tell anybody that they're going to fire her. That's not true. They're not going to fire her.
They wouldn't have just said what they did.
Right.
If they weren't going to show support for her.
Yep.
Her destiny is in her hand, to use the word destiny, which we love in Star Wars.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was all for that. I was glad that he came out and at least set the record straight, and set it straight in a way that says we're not going to be, I don't want to say it like this. We're not going to be bullied to fire her just because a portion of the fandom doesn't like her.
Yeah.
Which, again, you are allowed to have the criticisms that you have against her. I'm not saying she's been perfect, but I also don't think that anyone else could do the job
Right.
just yet. Eventually, someone will be able to.
Right.
And if that's John or Dave, I'm all for either of those.
Favroloni.
Let's make it happen. Co-CEOs or whatever. I don't even know what her title is anymore. But yeah, let's move on from that. Hopefully, no, it won't die down. But hopefully, some of the talk dies down a little bit.
Yep.
We got the record set a little bit straight.
Yeah.
What else?
And you know what? Maybe that's why they let them ask the question.
Maybe.
Because it's like, okay, now in front of all these shareholders, we can set the record straight and
Maybe.
be really clear.
Yeah.
That's my final thought on the subject.
Let's move on then.
Okay.
One other small piece of news. It might sadden some people, but I think I can put a ray of hope in there. See what I did there? Hey! That's the title of the episode.
Yes.
For those that might not have picked up on it, I'm harping too long on it. So there was a tweet that came out by DK Books that made some people pretty sad. DK Books is behind a lot of the great, what do you want to call them? Encyclopedias?
Reference
books,
guides? Reference type guides, yeah.
The Star Wars book?
Star Wars book, which we know and love.
The visual guides? The cross-sectionals? Like all that kind of stuff. They were putting one together for The Mandalorian. And they came out and said that they have canceled that. And added a little thing at the end there that just gave you hope that it'll still come back.
Okay.
Because it sounds like they're just saying, listen, the story's not done and we don't want to have to release more of these. I mean, they could have said, all right, we'll release 1 and 2 in a book and then we'll make more money later on when we release 3 and 4. Probably a great business decision. But I like the idea that they're just going to do it all in one book. Personally speaking, I don't want them digging into my wallet that much.
Right.
So I think this is still going to happen. I don't know why it was canceled. It wasn't given much context behind it. It was just, all right, we're not doing this right now. And that's partially because the story is unfolding. And that also included not just the visual guide, but an original novel as well that they were working on.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's just more to come. I don't know if it had anything to do with like Cara Dune's character or the drama there.
It's tough to say.
It's tough to say, but that's what happened. Let's hold our breath a little bit longer.
Yep.
Anyway.
And now it's time for more to the story.
Thanks for moving us on from my news was sad.
What was sad?
My news.
Well, yeah. Well,
controversial. Sad. I don't know the word.
It's yeah. We're left wanting, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's gonna come back. It'll be okay. We'll be talking about this on episode 30 or something. We'll be talking about how we read the novelization and we got the DK reference guidebook and loved it.
Yeah.
So it's not gone forever. Just for now.
Just for now. Let's move on to the other segment like you already did, though.
Yep.
So what are we talking about today?
We're talking about Rey. We're doing a character analysis, an overview of one of our favorite characters, a female hero from the Star Wars universe who we want to put up on a pedestal and say is awesome. But before we jump into actually talking about Rey, something that we do behind the scenes is we often have a conversation about what should the episode be called.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't say we, I will say that you are the pun master and that you come up with terrific punny names for our episodes. And
occasionally they're good enough to actually make the title of our episode.
Pretty much every time.
Not this time.
and this time we had a couple of real doozies.
Yeah.
Because Rey rhymes with different things, and there's, we have Ray of Hope is what made it in, and that's not like a bad pun or anything, but we had some bad ones.
Yeah, I still like them.
I like them too.
Do Re Mi,
Rey.
Yep. And what was the other one? Ray, a drop of golden sun, but name it what Ray mean Rui.
Uh-huh.
I had Sound of Music on the mind, if you can't tell.
And I had This Is the Rey.
Yeah. That one was a good one. I actually really like that one. We should almost change it to that.
I like a Ray of Hope because it is like her story arc ends on a really hopeful note and stuff.
Well, I'll actually say that this time when I was... So, how did you prepare for the episode?
So I went and I watched The Force Awakens, and I watched it for the first time through the eyes of somebody who's going to do a podcast about Rey, and I really honed in on her.
Yep.
And how she was being presented to the audience, and kind of analyzed her interactions with the people around her and the landscape around her, which I'll talk about a ton. because I really just kind of wanted to get a sense of how Rey is introduced in this story and how we get to know her.
I like that, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say. I watched The Rise of Skywalker, which I feel bookends her story a bit, so we'll kind of show both ends of her story, her introduction, and her conclusion, or at least the conclusion of her arc as we know it right now. And something that I noticed in the crawl this time as I was reading, and I feel like, I read this before, but again, through the eyes of someone who's about to speak about it, notice this and picked up on it a little bit more. In the crawl, it says, Rey is the last hope of the Jedi, which I thought was interesting because we talk about Luke always being the last Jedi, and now we've moved to Rey being the last hope of the Jedi, which is entirely accurate.
This is in the Rise of Skywalker crawl.
Right.
Yep.
So that's part of what caused me to think, Ray of Hope. Like, we should talk about it in that lens.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
But yeah, just the fact that she, even in this movie, she's not a Jedi. She isn't really everything that the Jedi claim to be. She's learning about them. She's learning about them from their origin point. But by the end, she's completely different. She is the last hope of the Jedi because, and we'll get to this later, but she is trained to use the Force. She's trained by Leia, who wasn't really a Jedi. She went through Jedi training with Luke, as we learn, but she wasn't a Jedi, for all intents and purposes. So I think she's just there to establish a new way for the good guys, the good side of the Force, to be portrayed.
Yeah.
And that's what she is to the Jedi. She is the hope of keeping the spirit of the Jedi alive.
She's a continuation, but it's like a new branch on the tree.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's interesting that you first kind of honed in on the fact that she's called out as that in the crawl, because something I went looking for when I was rewatching The Force Awakens was where she's mentioned in the crawl, and she's not.
In the opening crawl of Force Awakens?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's not mentioned. And I think that that's like a kind of a perfect way to start her story, because in the beginning, I think she herself feels pretty insignificant, sitting on Jakku, living as a scavenger, not even making the crawl of the movie.
Who makes the crawl? Luke?
Yep. So I think the crawl is more about the galactic conflict and stuff like that, and not so much about a insignificant little scavenger on Jakku.
Yep.
But that's a good question. I should have.
I'm pretty sure Luke and Leia are both mentioned in that crawl.
Yes.
Luke has vanished.
And and General Leia Organa Solo, or General Leia, maybe it just says. But so I think it's really interesting. She's not at all mentioned in the crawl. And then I think Jakku and the landscape around her tells us a lot. One of the first things I noticed was, and I guess I didn't pick up on this when I was watching it last time, is how drab the landscape and the environment is, and everything she's wearing is pretty drab and just blends into. It's almost like she's camouflaged. It's almost like she's in survival mode, which I guess everybody on Jakku seems to be. People are just barely getting by.
Yeah.
And so everything that she has is totally utilitarian. It's not like she's really doing anything for fun. She's just really just trying to survive, essentially. The other thing that I thought about this first time was she seems pretty young and innocent, and I can't imagine what it must be like to grow up in the wreckage of war. It's just all war machines around you, and you live off of picking bits and pieces and reselling them from these different war machines, from weapons, from giant destructive machines. She lives in the belly of an AT-AT.
Right.
That is not only just the wreckage of those vehicles, but the wreckage of the Empire too. So there's all these layers of just destruction that is the landscape around you.
I would argue, because I don't know what spin you're putting on that, but I would argue that she takes the positive of that, which is not to necessarily be overwhelmed by the destruction around her, but to see, she becomes nostalgic of it. She's a historian of it. She wants to learn more about it. She wants to know about that era. And it's shown when she eventually realized, she knows who Luke Skywalker is. And she thought he was a myth, right?
That's a good point.
Says that. So I think it actually espouses some good characteristics in her and makes her curious and makes her want to learn more. And probably in a way, almost feel like she was in that moment so that she's not afraid. She's more brave when she has to face those difficulties when she enters the war herself.
Yeah.
Right. So she takes a good spin on that, I think.
Yeah. Do you think maybe some of that also helps take her out of the moment and take her out of, because a lot of her life seems to be waiting to leave.
I think so. Because at one point she puts on the helmet and is like, trying to feel like, what would it be like to be fighting in the rebellion? And has this smile across her face, like, I would love to have known this, which in Rise of Skywalker, I noticed this time she is wearing Luke's helmet when she's piloting the X-Wing, and it's like she's got to fulfill that, actually.
Cool.
So
I never caught that. I love
never
that.
did. That was one thing I caught this time, and I love that.
Very cool. So a couple other things about when we meet Rey. She doesn't talk for a while when she's first on camera. She's working, she's picking, bits and pieces off of that Star Destroyer that's crashed in the desert. She sleds down the hill, but she's not doing it for fun. I think it's the most practical way to quickly get down that hill without exerting a lot of energy. And she doesn't talk for a while. And when she finally does talk, she doesn't speak English at first.
Right.
She shouts in some other alien language.
Telanama or whatever she says. How was that?
It was really good. And then they go back and forth, and then she has a conversation, kind of conversation with BB-8, and they go back and forth, and he's not speaking English. And so I thought that was really interesting in that she's not connecting with anybody immediately on the same wavelength, in the same language, as equals. She's an adversary to the guy who's trying to kidnap BB-8, and BB-8 is a droid, and she just wants to point him in the direction of town and kind of go on with her life. But I do think that they do a really nice job of introducing her with that tender moment where she's like, I'm going to save this droid from uncertain doom. And there's no reason to. Like, she's just eating her quarter portion and, watching the sunset, and she could have gone inside her AT-AT and called it a night.
Most people would have.
And she decided to intervene and straighten the little droid's antenna and help him out. So to me, like, I really kind of sunk my teeth into that opening part, just how she was sort of camouflaged in the landscape. You don't hear her voice. She's kind of voiceless. She's growing up around this wreckage. And I like the take that you've, the direction that you've gone with that. And it's a chance encounter. I think that's the other crazy thing too, is that BB-8 could have gone somewhere else, could have gone 100 yards away, and maybe none of this would have happened.
Something else I noticed when I was watching Rise of Skywalker is at the very end where she rejoins the fleet after their victory on Adon Kloss, was she gets out of the X-Wing, first person, whatever you want to say, droid that she sees is BB-8, and not only does she hug him playfully, right? She checks his antenna.
Oh, I never
Very
noticed that
subtly,
either,
just
dude.
like checks his antenna. It's like their little thing, and she does it in Last Jedi when they reconnect as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this antenna really represents a bond between them.
Mm-hmm.
From when they connected for the first time on Jakku.
And you know what else I think it shows? I think it shows a consistency and something that is one of the main themes about this character, and I think we're going to talk about that, is her identity.
Yep.
Who is she? She's nobody at first. She believes that she's nobody. She believes she has a family, though, who's going to come back for her, and that family, I think, helps her feel like she is somebody. And then later on, the story is about, all right, she knows who she is, but the struggle then becomes she has to accept it. And she does sort of accept it, but then she also very deliberately takes up the Skywalker name. So it's like, who is she the whole time? But when you see her straighten the antenna through 3 movies, you realize that some of that is just, I guess, superfluous to the fact that she's at the core the same person throughout the whole saga. She's this, like, the fundamentals are still good and the same throughout the whole saga.
Which, tip your hat to Daisy Ridley on that.
Yeah.
That's just a good actress right there, who gets in touch with her character so much that down to the detail, she recognizes who her character is, what motivates her, and can then execute that on screen.
Yeah.
Even as subtly as the antenna thing.
Yeah.
To keep doing that. Now, some of that was written in there, but I feel like with The Rise of Skywalker, maybe she was given some coaching behind the scenes to say, hey, when you see BB-8 again, just do this. But even if she was, it was so well executed. And if not, then even more of credit should go to Daisy Ridley.
I agree.
So, yeah. Anyway.
By the way, I'm really curious to see what she does next.
Well, she's coming out in Chaos Walking, which is a movie I think that's getting released this week, next week, sometime.
Oh, really? That
Yeah.
soon? Wow.
Yeah, it looks really interesting. I think I talked about it in the last episode, actually. So,
Yeah, things are still weird because we can't really go to movies the way we would like to. So
right. So we'll see what that looks like. And then after that, who knows? I think she said that after Rise of Skywalker, the phone stopped ringing for a little bit and she got nervous. She was like, oh my gosh, am I fired? Am I never going to get another job in Hollywood again? And she was very nervous. And then the phone started ringing, but hopefully she enjoyed that time a little bit too.
yeah,
So,
yeah, well deserved. I mean, we've talked before about how the sequel trilogy got cranked out really quickly. It's just in a matter of 5 years, you got all these movies.
yeah.
And
With a couple of movies in between.
with movies in between, which is a ton of fun, but it's got to be loads of work for the folks who are working on the movies. But
And at the same time, like, she had to get to know that character and be with that character for 5 years. That's a long time.
mm-hmm.
I mean, think about working on a project at work that takes 5 years.
Yeah,
That would be insane.
it is insane. A lot
I've never done
changes
it.
in 5 years.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, then there's a lot of really endearing moments for her as she works her way. And I'm not going to step through the whole movie, obviously, but she works her way off of Jakku for the first time
Yeah.
in the legendary Millennium Falcon, and
Which she knows.
What's that?
She knows what the Millennium Falcon is and who Han Solo is.
Yep, she knows what it is, but she didn't know that was the Millennium Falcon.
Right.
But she starts to be able to showcase all these different talents and skills. And I was thinking back to the beginning when she first meets BB-8 and how she's listening to BB-8, beeping and squeaking and whatever, and she can make out the language, and she's talking different alien languages and stuff, and just how integrated she is in the environment around her. And again, like the camouflage, you can sort of disappear, but you can use that to your advantage and appear when you need to, interacting in different languages and stuff. We got to see that she is, I guess, like a survivalist almost, and scavengers are generally. They can be flexible and adapt to the situations that they need to adapt to in order to get by. But there's a limit to that normally. And she starts to show that there's something special about her. Like she can really pilot a spaceship. She can really do different things to the spaceship to optimize its performance and stuff like that. And she starts to show some of her smarts and also some of her, I guess, reflexes and her instinct, which all start to kind of hint at, okay, maybe Rey is force sensitive. And,
Right.
I'm thinking back to the first time we watched this, and you start to see different things that show that she's exceptional in some way. But her character keeps reminding you, but I'm not. I'm nobody. I'm just a scavenger. I'm from nowhere. And I always love the bit with Han Solo where he's like, well, where? Jakku. Yeah, that is nowhere. Or is that Luke in Last Jedi who says that?
That's Luke that says that in
Yep.
Last Jedi. Yeah.
Sorry.
But Han Solo says, Jakku? Like, you want to go back there?
Right.
You've left. You should be happy.
Yeah, right. So she shows you things in her actions and her behaviors that show you how exceptional she is.
Right.
But she keeps telling you, because that's where she is in her personality, I think at the time of, you know what, I'm just a nobody. I'm just a regular person. I got to get back to Jakku. I'm just a scavenger on Jakku.
Well,
Meanwhile, she's, doing, 180s in the air, flying the Millennium Falcon, shooting down TIE fighters and stuff.
oh, yeah, she definitely can do more than what she says she can do, but she's being vulnerable. She's wearing who she is on her sleeve. And sometimes people do this as a coping mechanism. They almost just embrace the thing that they're afraid of being just to make it less painful almost. And I think that's what she's doing, because she, as they talk about in Rise of Skywalker, is afraid of two things. She's afraid of being no one,
Mm-hmm.
having no purpose, and she's afraid of being alone. Both of those things. And that they kind of go hand in hand a bit, but she keeps saying she's no one because it makes it a little bit easier for her to accept, like, if I am nobody and if I don't really have a purpose in this story, then maybe this will be a little bit easier for me to accept. So she's downplaying herself. And maybe it's a humility factor, but I think it's also a coping factor, because she's been abandoned on Jakku, family hasn't come back yet, and she has to find a way to make it to the next day.
Yeah.
Every day, and this just helps her to get there.
Yeah.
So it's a very tragic story, I think.
It is really heartbreaking. And I think you're right. I think some of that is, her accepting the worst. I think some of it is her being vulnerable. Some of that might just be a stuck pattern of, I think back to when she's scratching the notches on the inside of the AT-AT, and Another day's gone by and she scratches that line on the wall. And then it
Yeah.
zooms out a little bit and you see that the whole wall's covered.
Yeah.
Like after a while, you can beat things into your own head, kind of. You can start to convince yourself of limiting beliefs. And maybe that's what some of that is. And some of it might just be, disbelief of she gets off of Jakku and meets the legendary Han Solo. She meets Finn, who she thinks is a resistance fighter. And so that's intimidating as well. And, I don't want to like psychologize the character too much, but maybe there's a level of, I'm just this kid from the middle of nowhere. And what am I doing in this situation? Even though she can clearly hang with everybody.
Oh yeah. And she proves that time and time again. And a lot of people, I think this is where some of like the Mary Sue stuff came out, which I definitely disagree with. But like, she seems to know how to do so much. It's like, wow, how did you learn to do all of that? She's a mechanic. She can fly. She is sensitive with the Force. She's essentially Luke, Leia, and Han wrapped in one.
Oh, I never thought of that. Yeah.
She can do so much. It's very unique and special, and probably is rare across the galaxy. And that's why you showcase her. That's why she's your main character of this
Right.
entire trilogy.
Right.
Because that's the kind of character we want to follow and we build a story around. And at the same time, she has all these flaws.
That's what I'm always like with the fandom menace people. Like what do you want? Do you want to follow? Do you just want to follow a droid? Do you want to follow a gonk droid for 3 movies?
Bonk, bonk.
Would that be more realistic for you?
By the way, that was my attempt at making the sound of a gonk droid. How did I do?
Pretty good.
Okay.
Pretty good. Yeah, I just don't know what people want. I think it's a really good point. If like this exceptional person in the galaxy is probably going to be the center of the movie.
Oh, has to be.
That doesn't mean it's not realistic. It means it makes sense that that person's the center of the movie.
But that's my point. Is like she can do all these things, but then again, she's also not perfect, and we explore those flaws. We explore the difficulties that she has to go through. Nobody should be left abandoned by their parents somewhere, and be forced to live a life as a scavenger. That's just. But this is the galaxy that they live in.
Yeah.
This is just the hand that she was dealt, and she has all these skills. She's built them because she's needed to survive, and in those survivalist instincts has become very powerful. And great, she's force sensitive too, but doesn't know why. So I think there's so much that she has to explore through all 3 of these movies. And to me, it's hard to really argue that she is a Mary Sue, because you see her develop as a character. Mary Sues don't develop. Not very well, I don't think.
That's a good point, because like the definition of a Mary Sue is like, I think part of it is that they're generally, you unbox them and they're perfect already.
Yeah.
There's no need for development because they're invincible and perfect and whatever.
Right, but she's not the same person by the end of Force Awakens that she was at the beginning. Same thing with Last Jedi, same thing with Rise of Skywalker.
Mm-hmm.
She evolves in every movie.
Mm-hmm.
Right there is the antithesis of a Mary Sue. So let's not get into that too much, but I thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah. So going a little bit further, I think at Maz's castle, I think there's some interesting moments for her. One of them is the obvious one where she feels the lightsaber calling to her, and she has a moment where, it's really disorienting the way that JJ shows it on the screen, where it's like the background's fading and sort of zooming back, but other stuff is zooming forward, and it's a moment where people kind of like, grip their chair in the movie theater because it's just so like disorienting, I think is the right word for it.
Yeah.
But so she doesn't know what's happening. She gets swept up in it. To this day, we all wonder why Luke's lightsaber was in there. But I think the other moment that is really interesting there is, so the battle happens and they get Rey and they take her away. And then they decide to go after her to rescue her. And it's the first time, I was reading this online, somebody pointed out that Rey's been waiting for somebody to come and get her. And this is the first time that somebody comes and gets her.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
And
that's special.
Yeah, that's special. In that moment, scavengers generally are opportunists in that like a scavenger dog will eat something if there's something laying around, but they'll hunt if they have to. And we've talked before about how people think that T-Rexes were scavengers, that they would just pick things up and hunt if they were pressed to. But I think the other thing that often people think about scavengers is like, it's sort of lonely. Like, there's that one vulture on the side of the road or whatever. And this is where Rey, I think, becomes part of a group, where she really becomes part of, I guess, almost a pseudo family for her. Like Finn goes after her and all of a sudden she feels like she's got this debt to him. And I think that's the moment she kind of stops being a scavenger for me. And she starts being part of this group, and a mission starts to come into focus for her that isn't just purely survival for herself.
You're right. I mean, my mind is just attached to that moment where she runs back into Han and Finn on Starkiller Base, who have come to rescue her. She is shocked.
Yeah.
And then Chewie and Chewbacca, let's not forget Chewie was there. My bad.
Yep.
And then Chewie says something, and he goes, "What did he say?" And she goes, "It was your idea," and gave him a hug. Like, that is her showing like how much that meant to her, that somebody came and rescued her.
Yeah.
Somebody came for her. She wasn't alone anymore.
Think of all those notches she scratched where nobody came for her. Like all those days, years, months, whatever. And now somebody came for her.
I'm finally special enough for them to send, somebody after me. And there was a dual mission there, not just to rescue her, but to try to knock down the defenses of Starkiller Base so that they could attack it. But still, like, while you're there, let's save Rey.
Yeah.
So that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So that's a great moment. So for me, that's like a pivotal point. She goes from being the scavenger from Jakku to being part of the Resistance, if just by accident.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All of that is kind of by fate.
Yeah.
But
the Force, the hand of the Force guiding
the way
things.
the Force willed it. So you're right. And then by the end of the movie, she is a full-blown member of it. She's going off. I love that she was the one that was sent to find Luke. Leia's brother has exiled himself. She should be the one to go. This is her brother, but she's sending Rey.
What do you think that is?
That's a good question. I think that's partially her saying, "This is my place. I need to be the leader here."
Yeah, I agree with that.
And you are Force sensitive, we've just learned. You have a lot of questions. Luke is kind of your hero. Maybe you should be the one to go. And Leia's entrusting Rey to be the one to go and find him. Instead of sending the entire army there, which she wouldn't want to do, because as soon as she does, everyone follows her there and they destroy the island. Like, that's not great. So let's just send one person, and Rey was the right person to send in her mind. And it just shows the wisdom of Leia, I think.
The best.
So, anything else from Force Awakens?
I think that's my pivot point of she becomes part of the Resistance there. And,
I like that.
So the next chapter begins.
Yeah, and that is The Last Jedi. We won't go through that too much because, like we said, it's not how we prepared for it. But I think there were a lot of defining character moments in that movie as well. I do feel like she took a little bit of a not a back seat, but shared the spotlight in that movie with a lot of the other characters really well, and all the other ones as well. But then I think she retook the spotlight in Rise of Skywalker, because that movie, I mean, it's about the Rise of Skywalker, and by the end of it, she takes the Skywalker name. It's about her becoming the last hope of the Jedi. So some of the things that really stood out to me this time is, I've already mentioned like the opening crawl, but it's some of the things that were said to Rey, or that Rey said. So at one point, Leia tells Rey, which I love the idea that this is Leia saying this, and she's already passed, but she's saying this to her. It's basically in Force Awakens, and it works so well in this context. In telling Rey to never be afraid, she said, "Never be afraid of who you are." And we later find out Leia already knows who she is, that she is a daughter of Palpatine. This granddaughter of Palpatine, my bad. And she's telling her then, like, don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of being the person that you are, and setting that seed so that when she eventually learns that she is a Palpatine, Leia's already given her the lesson to hopefully overcome that, which is beautiful. And the fact that she didn't even deliver it for that movie, that she delivered it for Force Awakens.
Yes.
So that to me just says, hey, lucky that you got that, but
that might have been the Force intervening there too.
Maybe, yeah, something. JJ was smart and pulling that out and saying we can use that and kind of build around it for this movie. So I thought that was great. There was another great line where, when she meets Zori Bliss for the first time, and Zori's got the pistol pointed at her. I'm blanking on the word. Not a pistol.
The blaster?
Blaster.
Yep.
Thank you. Why did I do that? The blaster pointed at her, and then she points the lightsaber back. And then Zori says, not that you care, but I think you're okay. And then Rey says, I care. Who says that? Like, I just beat you to the ground, had this fight with you, and I'm going to tell you that I care that you think I'm okay. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It just shows an aspect of her character that she's compassionate. She loves first.
Mm-hmm.
Even if she's fighting somebody, she's always going to love somebody first.
And I've always loved the characteristic of people when they're not sore winners.
Yeah.
And that's what she was not a sore winner in that moment. She kept it classy.
Yeah, exactly. She was very Ron Burgundy in that moment. Sorry, you said classy. That's where my mind went. Here's something else that stood out to me. So the part where C-3PO is about to wipe his memory so that he can give the translation of what's on the dagger, right? Rey stops, right before he's about to do this, and C-3PO is putting up a little bit of a fight. He doesn't want to have his memory wiped, and Rey asks him simply, "You know the odds better than anyone." It's something like that, and it causes him to pause and to do a little bit of a back take and think like, "Whoa, you're asking me for the odds? People hate it when I do this. Who are you to ask me that?" And it changes his demeanor, and he immediately pivots and goes, "You're right. Let me think of this. This is the only way for us to succeed." And now he's willing to do that.
She leads him to it.
Yeah.
But she doesn't force him there.
Because she cares about what he thinks about the odds. Nobody else has cared about that up until this point. And so again, little stuff like that. Like she cares about the characters in this story much more than anyone else has cared about them before. That takes them off their guard.
It's such a simple concept, but it's so spot on. She brings a level of caring to everybody around her, and it impacts everybody differently and for the better, I think. I love that. I never even thought about like her caring as much as she does about the people around her. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I think it's very character defining for her to show that much care and emotion for others.
All the while kind of struggling with who she is herself.
Right.
Like giving a lot of compassion and care. And then I think internally still sort of focused on her own survival and not so much compassion, care, and cultivation of her own character or anything like that. What do you got there?
So here is...
Ben Skywalker's picking up a book.
This is... I still buy the Blu-rays and 4K of stuff like, the movies that I really want to own. If they're Star Wars and Marvel, I own them. The hard copies, not just streaming them. So this is from the Target box set that came out for 4K.
It's a cookbook on how to prepare porgs.
Definitely not that. But if there is one, I want one. It might be in yours, right? Oh no, you didn't get the cookbook. You got the Ewok.
I did have a Star Wars cookbook for a while.
You did?
Yeah. I think
you gave that to me.
I handed it off to you.
Yeah, and I still have that.
Some of it was just like normal everyday stuff with a funny Star Wars name.
Yeah, which would be interesting, but I don't know. I haven't cooked anything in it yet, by the way. So maybe I should actually cook it and then.
It was like Jawa chocolate, and then it's just a normal hot chocolate.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you.
But porg, if you ever get your hands on any porg, that's a delicacy.
Right.
Good a porg fillet.
As Chewbacca would know.
Yes.
Just one time though. He doesn't eat them anymore.
Yeah, because I think he ate that one in front of the family or something.
Yeah, they pouted in front of him. He's like, "Hey, that's the last time I ate pork, I guess."
I felt terrible.
I know, poor guy. He was just hungry.
But I'm sorry, I'm interrupting.
So this came with the book, or with the set. It's a little gallery book, and in it they kind of cover some characters and stuff. But there are a couple of lines in here that I really liked, and that kind of describe who she is and what she's going through in this movie. So first it says, this one stood out to me. She has every reason not to be the hero of the sequel trilogy. Rey has a deep well of compassion, despite or perhaps because of how cruelly the universe has treated her.
I love that.
It's powerful, isn't that? The deep well of compassion. And when I was thinking about her defining traits, is what I was focused on as I was watching this, the movies. Compassion was the number one thing I thought of. Right? She's shown compassion to BB-8, to Zori we talked about, even to the Vexus, the snake, in the cave and healing it, which establishes one of the powers that with the Force that I don't think we had seen too much of before.
Right.
And she's gifted in that way. And then it comes back a couple times in the movie, right? And then with Kylo Ren. And the fact that she had just stabbed him through the abdomen and immediately heals him. Like, that's very compassionate.
Totally. And I love the idea that it's her harsh upbringing that helps her get there. 'Cause
Yeah.
it goes back to that idea of you can't really be good unless you're capable of being bad. If you're just good and you're not capable of being bad, well, there's a weakness, I think, to that. And I think it also goes back to the idea that you have this crossroads. If you're a character who comes up in a really difficult environment, you can choose to take that out on the world around you, or you can choose to be the antidote for that kind of world. And I
Yeah.
think she chooses compassion.
Yeah.
Maybe not deliberately or thoughtfully, but she makes that choice with her actions, and that's consistent throughout the whole series. I love that.
Yeah. And this is a really dark movie for her, right? And the fact that she keeps tapping into that compassion, she's having visions of her being on the throne. She's
Yes.
going through.
She meets Darkrai.
Yeah, I was gonna say that vision that she has with Darkrai, and time after time, her stabbing Kylo Ren through the abdomen is so interesting. She's just so furious at that moment, and she just almost doesn't even think. Again, not a Jedi way to do something like that. She does, and immediately goes back to having compassion.
Yeah.
And instead of running, I mean, she eventually decides, I just need to run away from Palpatine. But then eventually she realizes, no, I got to go fight him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to go and do that and against all odds, like that takes a lot of bravery and guts. So she's going through a hard. I think I've said this in past podcasts. It's really difficult what she goes through in Force Awakens. The hard thing that she has to go through is when Maz says you have to accept that your family is never coming back. Oh my gosh, that's gut-wrenching and hard to do. All right. She eventually gets there, though. She accepts they're not coming back. I am now part of this resistance. I'm moving on with my life and this part of it. But this is still a core part of who she is. It still eats at her. And we see that in The Last Jedi. She goes in the cave. And in the cave, she wants to know the answer about her parents. She doesn't get an answer. It's still eating at her. And in this movie, she's going, again, she's afraid of being alone and not having a purpose. She gets to the point where she has to accept that she is nobody because her parents were nobody. It's really difficult to do. A lot of people loved that story. Some people hated it. Some people wanted her to be a Kenobi or whatever it was, but she has to accept she's a nobody. Really hard to do. Another character building moment. What would be more difficult than that? How about finding that you're a descendant of evil? That would be hard, right? And that's what she goes through in Rise of Skywalker. That's the hardest trial that she has to face, and she comes out on the right end of it. So that's why you can't tell me she's a Mary Sue again, because I just look at that and say, like, how would any average person face this trial? They'd crumble. They'd have a really hard time with it. And she is up to the challenge each time and becomes someone better because of it. And so by the very end of the movie, she has decided, I now have a purpose, and I have people that I'm surrounded by that I love, that love me. I've realized the two things I was afraid of, I'm no longer afraid of. And that's part of her taking on the Skywalker name, I think. It is everything that she hopes and wants to be. And so she's embracing that.
I can relate to the.
You're like, where do I go from here?
I was just thinking. I've never really shared this publicly, but I can relate to the being descendant from evil because my great uncle's Dracula.
What is that?
Dracula?
Well, I know Dracula, but what is
vampire? I'm just kidding.
Okay, I'm just like, wait, what? I'm lost now.
I'm descendant of the Mummy from my second cousin is Frankenstein. I'll move on.
Okay. Like, you're like, Ben, I don't know what to do with all that stuff you just said.
So yeah, I'm just
gonna throw
word
something
vomit
at you that you won't know what to do with.
But no, I think you wrapped it up there really nicely. I think that you hit on like some of the stuff that I guess are like her insecurities and how she overcomes them by accepting a lot and then by deciding what her fate should be and deciding the direction she wants to go. And so one of my big questions with Rey is always, does she come back in movie form, comic book form,
Yeah.
novelization? Like, what's the canon version of her story that continues? I'm really curious, and maybe they never touch it again, or maybe a decade goes by before they come back to it.
Yeah.
But I do think that, again, to bring it back to the beginning of the conversation about how Rey creates this new branch on the tree that kind of spawns off from the Jedi Order. So it's a new thing, new direction. She's the only one, but she's got to know that there's other, this is a story that repeats in Star Wars. She's got to know that there are other force sensitive beings out there, and that some of them may succumb to the dark side. I could see her compassionately reaching out and preventing that.
Yeah.
And kind of like taking in, force sensitive younger folks who are on the margins, who maybe have a risk of falling into a deep dark trap of some kind.
Yeah.
And setting up some kind of new version of the Jedi Academy.
I hope so.
I think something like that would be super cool. Again, maybe it's a video game, maybe it's a animated series, maybe it's something that, who knows. But I definitely welcome that. And they don't give you any hint of this is the direction that she's definitely going to go in and what she's going to do with her time after these movies.
It's ended for her.
Yeah.
I think it's that arc has ended. A new arc has begun.
Yep.
And I think that happens in people's lives all the time. Regularly. It's just like, hey, that arc is over. I'm starting anew. And maybe we will get that in movie form or comic form. Who knows? I think it's going to be a little bit of time because they want to do it right. And if you can do it in movie form, do it. You've established this character in movies. People want to see her. They love her. And the only thing that would stop her coming back is if no one else does. So this has to be a getting the band back together moment.
Which is tough to do.
And with where it left and the state of things right now, it's going to be really tough. Never say never. It's possible. They're motivated by money too. Like if money is right, like they might be able to do it. But it's difficult to see it right now in that form. And so they'll probably say, all right, if it's not going to be that way, let's novelize it. Let's put it in comics. Let's do something, right? They told the story of Kylo Ren and what happened between the Jedi Temple fire and him becoming Kylo Ren in a comic book form. And it was fantastic. It was great. I think I've raved about that now 3 times on these episodes.
Yeah, so they could do something like that potentially.
They could. And they could do that with her rebuilding the Jedi Temple or stories in between all these things. I don't know. We'll find out. Or even like her time on Jakku before she became, part of the Resistance.
That would be cool too. Like a Marvel series, a Marvel comic book series on Unkar Plot.
Yeah.
And she works her way in as his, I guess, whatever, her steward or whatever, where she has to work for him and basically everything but a slave, I guess, is her relationship to Unkar Plot.
Yeah.
But it could be something like that too. But I do think that that's a place where fans of the saga want to go and want to find out what happens next. But I do think it needs a few years to cool off.
Yep. Let it simmer a little bit. Figure it out. They've got some great stuff on the horizon. So let's just wait for it. A couple more questions for you,
please,
that I want to talk about. What would you say are some of her defining traits? And I've got my own list, but I want to hear what you think.
Yeah, so I wasn't thinking compassion at the top of the list. I was kind of outside looking in on her identity crisis. That's a thing that kind of probably jumps out as the headline for me in a lot of cases, where she's either pushing back when people are giving her hints that there's something exceptional about her and saying, I'm not that, I'm a nobody, I'm a scavenger, or she's wrestling with the acceptance of being a Palpatine or taking command of her next phase of life and saying, I'm a Skywalker. So that to me is like a constant like turmoil type thing. I think that she is a survivor of all kinds. So whether it's she's trapped on Jakku and having to find a way to make it through day to day, or piloting through a particularly difficult like shoot 'em up dogfight space battle, or whatever it might be, thrown down with Palpatine. She has a grit to survive and an ability that's uncanny. Yeah. But I do love the addition of the idea of her compassion being one of her core traits, because now that I'm seeing it after you talked me through some of that, like that shows up over and over again, and it does make the characters around her better and changes the people around her.
They're drawn to her.
Yeah, people are drawn to that, like, and it comes across as genuine and and all that. So I'm adding that to my list. So those are the few that come to mind
I
immediately.
like grit. That's a good one.
Yeah.
And she definitely has a lot of that. I put a different word down for that, but I would adopt the word grit maybe in place of it. And I put fierce.
Yeah.
Like if you see her, the scene with the Praetorian guards after Snoke is killed, just fierce, angry, a lot of energy coming out of her. You don't want to mess with her.
You know what's interesting? I was just reading something about the shooting of that scene the other day. And as a reminder for folks, this is the scene in Snoke's throne room with the red colored guards with the red banners, and it's one of the best, I think, fight scenes in all of Star Wars.
Oh yeah.
And apparently it was so exhausting and like athletic for the actors to shoot that when they would get something that Ryan Johnson was happy with, they would like celebrate like they just scored a touchdown. Like they were jumping up and down and screaming. Like when he would say like, we finally got it. Because it
Oh,
was so it was just such hard work that every time they got a piece of it that he was happy with, they went bananas apparently.
I'm not surprised. It
Not
looks like it would
surprised
be
either.
very difficult to pull off, and then when he
Yeah.
did, you're like, "That was it, right?
Yep.
Really, we
Yep.
did it."
That probably just screaming and high-fiving and hugging each other like they just won something. But
Yeah,
I like
doing a little
fierce.
sideline dance.
Spiking the ball. I like fierce and I like gritty. I like that. Not Flyers gritty.
That's a sick fucking gritty.
Stop picturing that. But yeah, the grit
Exactly
and the
what reminded
toughness and just the resolve to survive and succeed.
Well, and I already mentioned a few of the other ones that I put down on my list, and I mentioned nostalgic. Like she obviously knows her history, and she's surrounded by it, and becomes a student of it, and kind of gets enamored in it. And that's why I loved seeing her wearing Luke's helmet when she was in the X-wing. It was her payoff moment. Like that fantasy that she was living while nobody was coming to rescue her, that kind of kept her going. That was the fuel that kept her going, was just imagining being there in those moments, being
Yeah.
part of those battles, and being a hero. And she got to realize that fantasy, realize that vision for herself.
So
She was living it.
that's another thing that kind of comes out and carries through the stories. Like in the beginning, she's a bit of a dreamer, and she's
Yeah.
dreaming about getting off of Jakku, and she's dreaming about her family. And then she starts to dream about. At some point, she learns about the legends of Luke Skywalker and so on, and she's probably daydreaming about that stuff. So I think a lot of people I know who are kind of the dreamer types, like that doesn't go away. So I wonder, when she becomes Rey Skywalker and goes back to Tatooine and buries this, like, what is she dreaming of at that point?
Yeah.
I don't think that goes away, and I think she probably aspires to something. And again, I'm kind of going into the future, but I think that that's probably something that's core to who she is.
Oh yeah, I would agree. Let's see, resilient
Mm-hmm.
is another word I put down. I mean, she's very patient not to go through what she was doing on Jakku. I think she pushes through it and pushes through the Palpatine crisis as much as possible. Like she just keeps getting faced with difficulty after difficulty, and she faces them all. Not perfectly, and so that was another word I would know was flawed. Like she doesn't do all of this perfectly, and she makes a lot of mistakes along the way. She thinks she nearly kills Chewie. That wasn't really her fault. She didn't know that she had that within her. But she pushes people away. She pushes Finn away a lot.
Yeah.
She's just doing it to cope.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, she's very flawed in all that, and tormented too. Right? So it's very difficult what she goes through, but I think she's well balanced with the compassion, with the focus on, the focus on being the good, within her, instead of when she learns that she's got Palpatine in her, instead of going, okay, well, I'll just succumb to that because that's who I am. Like she forces her way through that. So I don't know. Very strong character. Really, like when Force Awakens came out and we learned who she was, it was probably like within the week I had a Funko Pop of her on my desk. Like so quickly. I was like, I gotta have something because she's now one of my favorite characters for a lot of reasons that we talked about today. But another question for you. Favorite
Please.
moments?
Favorite Rey moments. One of my, and these are unranked, not in any particular order. One of my favorites is when, what is the snake creature called?
Vexus?
A Vexus. When she heals the Vexus and she says to BB-8 that she did the right thing. She transferred some of her life force, and she says to BB-8, "You would have done the same."
Yeah.
And then BB-8 goes and he does the same for Dio, the droid on Ochi's ship, and basically brings him back to life by sharing a piece of him.
I heard that this time because you mentioned that.
I love that part.
Yep.
When somebody first pointed that out to me, I was just like, mind blown. I loved it. So that's a favorite piece. So I'll kind of go out of maybe in a slightly different direction, but I've some favorite moments of her acting, of Daisy Ridley's acting and how she portrays Rey. I think in the quiet moments in the very beginning of The Force Awakens, I think some of the acting is just superb, honestly, where she's not saying anything and she's communicating so much just by how she's moving and her facial expressions.
That's true.
Like when she sits down to scrub the pieces of mechanics or whatever, the component parts of the Star Destroyer, and she looks across from her and that older lady is there.
Yep.
And she's picturing herself being, 80 years old and still doing this.
Mm-hmm.
There's something Daisy does with her face and her eyes that communicate panic and regret and sadness and concern and all that stuff. And then she goes and gets her quarter portion and she doesn't protest, even though it seems like it's being pretty cheap of Unkar plot.
Yeah.
She doesn't protest, but just what her eyes do and what her face does shows all the just churning discomfort inside of her. So like that first 10 minutes of her on screen in The Force Awakens is some of my favorite acting of her in the whole series.
That's good.
But I think she does action really well. I think a lot of her back and forth with Luke Skywalker makes for some of my favorite moments because she is all that stuff we just talked about.
They have great
She's compassionate. She's gritty. She's resilient. And she's met her match for a lot of that movie and is butting heads with him and can't believe that this is the legendary Luke Skywalker and he's not giving her a hand.
Yeah.
So that's just a sampling of some of the stuff that jumps out at me that I love.
And they say never meet your heroes, but she's resilient through that even.
Right. Yeah. And it ends in a good spot.
Yes, it does. I mean, we see where it doesn't really end in a good spot after Last Jedi. It does after Rise of Skywalker, though.
Ultimately,
he comes back.
It ends in a good spot.
Right. Ultimately, it does. Which I'm so glad they did.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite parts of Rise of Skywalker, was when he comes back and has one. To me, because remember the whole 3 lessons and then a deleted scene was the 3rd lesson and they never really covered it.
Yeah.
That to me was the 3rd lesson. Like, I've got one more lesson to you. I promise you 3, and I'm here to give it to you.
Mm-hmm.
And, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of what the lesson was, but it was, he admits that he was wrong in that moment. And the lesson is that she has everything that she needs, that she can choose who she is. And her destiny has not been decided for her.
Did you ever see, by the way, they went to Harrison Ford and asked him if he would go back as a Force ghost?
And he goes, "What's a Force ghost?"
He was like, "What is a Force ghost?"
Yeah.
But I think he asked it in a way where it was clear he didn't care what the answer was.
Right. Gotta love him. I'm going to quickly highlight them, then we can end. Some of my favorite character moments was when she healed Ben Solo, when she showed that compassion. I loved that. She didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
She loves him. Like, there's a connection there. She realizes that. And that moment was so jarring for her that she decides to heal him. I love that. I love that she takes on the name Skywalker. She doesn't find out who she is. She decides who he is finally and realizes that she needs to do that. I love on Starkiller Base when she gets a lightsaber. That moment where it's in her hands. And again, you mentioned the great acting. Like, she looks at it like, did this just happen? And then when she lights up the lightsaber and you can see the look of fear on her face, like, what am I doing right now? Yeah. It's great acting by Daisy. And it's so well executed. So that's another one of my favorites. The Mirror Cave.
Yes, great one.
And as she's kind of talking through it, I liked what she said. It's just a great moment when, she doesn't get the answer and she's just down, distraught, like at her lowest. And guess who she turns to? Kylo Ren. That's tough. And then even just like the first encounter with Kylo Ren, just the stressfulness of it. And it's a very deep moment between them and her acting. And if you've seen like the audition tape of her doing that scene, because that's the scene that she used to audition, and she's like crying and it's powerful. So really good moments, I think. But anyway, we've been talking for a long time about Rey. Let us bring this episode to a close. So what are we talking about next time?
So next time we're going to talk about Mandalorian Season 2. So just a few weeks ago, we had our first episode where we did a recap of this past season. We were already feeling nostalgic for it. It's time for us to come back to it. It's time for us to tackle the middle act of Season 2, which is the bit where we get Ahsoka and a lot of other really, really exciting stuff. So I'm excited to rewatch it. It's probably been a couple of months since I've watched most of the episodes of the Mandalorian. So I'm ready to go back and really dig into it again.
Yep, same with me, man. I think it's time. We watched a couple of the episodes recently and really enjoyed them. But I mean, I've been watching WandaVision and dude, so excited for Falcon and the Winter Soldier this week. So like,
awesome.
Those have been taking some time as well. But when I get the chance, I go and go watch these episodes, and they're great. These next 3 that we're going to cover. So just to clarify, it's I don't remember what episode 4 is called right now.
I don't either.
Episodes 4, 5, and 6.
Yep.
Ending with the tragedy, which we'll talk about next time. So tune in, rewatch those.
Yeah.
Get fresh on those yourselves, all of our listeners, and be ready to talk about those 3 episodes of season 2. And we'll bring that to you next time.
Yep.
Any parting words?
Yeah, a few things. So as always, thank you for listening. We're really, really, really grateful that anybody out there spends any time with us, and much less people that we've never met before from around the world. So thank you for being part of the Star Bros family. We love to hear from you guys. So send us an email, thestarbrospodcast@gmail.com. You can add us as a friend on Twitter and send us messages through Twitter, or just send us memes. We love those. We're at Star Bros Podcast on Twitter, or you can find us on Facebook. Just look up the Star Bros Podcast, and again, feel free to send us memes, send us messages about the kind of stuff that you want to hear about. And and lastly, I almost forgot, check us out on the BROAXIUM YouTube channel. So we're proud members of the BROAXIUM family, and there are terrific videos on that channel where some of our bro hosts do previews of the latest Star Wars comic books that are coming out. And Ben and I, if you haven't seen them, we cover the High Republic comics. So once a month, usually at the very beginning of the month, we'll cover a couple of those, and there's a nice backlog. So if you want to go back and get caught up on what's happening in Star Wars comics, that's a great place to do it. So check that out. Smash every subscribe button you can find. Leave a review on whatever platform it is that you're listening on. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, for example, leave whatever many stars you think we have earned. You feel free to type something up. That helps us out a lot. It helps to ensure that we come up in search results and things like that. But from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much. And I think maybe you have something to say to close this out.
Well, I have 2 things to say.
2?
So the first thing I want to say is, as part of going to the BROAXIUM channel, make sure you check out our own bro hosts, Chris and Dan, who were recently on a Solo 2 AI script by, what is it, Blue Bantha Milk?
Yep.
I can't remember the full name of it.
Yeah, it's Blue Bantha Milk.
Blue Bantha Milk, thank you.
And they have a few different episodes where they do a live table read of a Star Wars script that is written by AI.
Yeah.
So basically they lift up the top of a robot's head and they dump in a bunch of scripts, and then it barfs out a new script, which they
Barf
then
is
read.
the right word, right? It's so great.
And they do a terrific job, and it is very lighthearted, and I'm really, really, really impressed with just like the comedic timing and the delivery of a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And our bro hosts, Chris Ryans and Daniel Miller, look them up on Twitter as well. Absolutely crushed it in this one, and also they did an episode 10. So they, I'm laughing at just like picturing some of the crazy characters who the AI invents.
Yeah.
And also some of the dialogue. But one of the things that I'm really pumped about from all this is the people at Blue Bantha Milk, since they're generating some of these new characters and stuff, have come up with the Banthaverse, which is this expanded universe where these characters live. And like, if like Chris Ryans, for example, plays a new character in the Banthaverse, they're just going to keep inviting him back as often as that character pops up in all this content. So
I like that.
I say that to say there's more of this to come, and I'm really excited about it.
Totally am too. Make sure you go check it out because it's fun, it's funny, it's lighthearted, all the things that you said. So make sure to check that out on their channel. And the last thing I'll leave you with is, it's a wrap. Get an applause for that one. Nice.